Hey Wilson, how's it going tonight?
Good, Mike. How are you?
Good, good. How's everything?
Good, good. Making it through quarantine just like everyone else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's start with a little bit about yourself. Your high school your high school path of a little bit about yourself, what sports you played in high school, and how you started playing high school handball.
Sure. So just a little background. I went to J. Percy Page Composite High School.
Yeah,
I graduated in 2016. While I was there, I played basketball, volleyball, and handball mainly.
yeah.
Um, in terms of starting high school handball, I played in grade 10 and I played in grade 12. And starting was mainly, I have an older sister, who some of you might know. Her name's Kelsey. And she played the year before, and it was a cool new game that I'd never seen before. And watching her play just made me excited to play as well.
So why didn't you play in grade 11?
So, funny story. I was in a musical at my school.
Yeah.
So I was in Beauty and the Beast, and the show dates conflicted with the handball season.
Yeah.
So I didn't do it that year, and I was the Beast in Beauty and the Beast in grade 11, and just did that instead.
I never knew this story. Not many people do they?
No, I haven't told a ton of people, honestly.
Yeah, I'm sure if people listen to this, I'm sure they're gonna bring it up with you.
I mean, if you scrounge my mom's Facebook, I'm pretty sure you can find some photos of me in my costume if you really want to look.
Nice.
So,
You also played in summer games, right?
yeah. So the summer between grade 10 and grade 11, I played in the Alberta Summer Games. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um, so so now in high school you're playing all the sports. In grade 12 is when you started trying. You decided to try out for Alberta Youth Development Program. What
Mhm.
made you want to do that and take away from you as well? From what I know, you were really heavily involved in basketball.
So part of it was the opportunities that would be afforded to me with handball. So, like I said, my older sister, she graduated a year earlier than me, obviously, and she played. She tried out for the Alberta development team, and she went on the development trip that year. So she went to Germany and Iceland,
Okay.
and seeing the opportunity that she had internationally, and just the experiences that she had and how much she enjoyed it, that just made me really wanted to do handball. With basketball, it was like I could have maybe gone to some smaller colleges in Edmonton, maybe as a walk-on to maybe something like Kings or Concordia,
Yeah.
but that really didn't interest me. It was something I really wanted to pursue sport at a higher level, and handball was the thing that was really attractive, just because of the travel and all the coaching, and I really enjoyed the sport as well.
And in your high school, how'd you guys do at that time?
We were pretty competitive. So when I was in grade 10, we got second in cities and second in provincials.
Who'd you guys lose to then?
Um, we lost to East Glen.
Okay.
So
Noah's team?
I think
Was it Noah?
Noah was on that team. I think he was a bench warmer like me.
Okay.
Aloysius might have been on that team as well. I'm really not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but they were older guys. I'm not sure I knew most of them. Most of
Yeah.
the grade 12s on that East Glen team. And then when I was in grade 12, we had a bunch of athletes, and we didn't do as great. I think we got fourth in the city that year. We didn't make it to provincials.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did high school handball uh, really, that's when you started falling in love with the sport?
Yeah. I really enjoyed in grade 12 especially. It's just something that like I really enjoyed. It's very different. It incorporates a ton of different skills from a ton of different sports.
Yeah.
Um, and me having played a bunch of different sports my whole life, it's something that I really just gravitated to.
Uh,
And something that I really enjoy.
so just keep on the high school part. You're obviously now becoming a teacher. You coach high school handball. Looking back on it, what are things when you were as a player in Alberta? We weren't as developed in high school compared to now as you as a coach.
What are things that Alberta developed in me as a handball player?
No, like in high school when you were a player,
Mhm.
the things you weren't developed in, like they
Yeah.
didn't really work with you on those kind of skills compared to what you do now as a high school coach?
A big thing is knowledge. So just in terms of understanding the game, we had coaches that were volunteer parents when I was in high school. So they'd seen the game a little bit, but it wasn't. They didn't understand. Oh, you need to do this in order to break down the team. It was really just, oh, well, you guys are good athletes. Figure it out. We'll be here and supervise. I love my high school coaches.
Yeah,
But it was less knowledge, I would say,
yeah.
that I experienced. It was a lot of, yeah, figuring it out yourself as athletes and working together as a team, which of course is still important, but just having that knowledge and the technical aspects as well, are things that I think when I was in high school were lacking in the coaching.
Do you see that is a big difference right now in our high school season compared to when you played 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, we have videos saved of when we went to provincials in grade 10, and watching the handball is painful. It's not high quality. Seeing some high school teams from the recent years, like the Lillians of the world, some of Ainley's teams, um, they've definitely improved. Shep from last year, Sal from last year. I think the level is continuing to improve every year. I think more players are getting familiar with the game earlier, which is
Yeah,
obviously a huge help. And then we have a bunch of coaches, some of my teammates and some of my former coaches,
yeah.
that are always making themselves better as coaches and just adding more knowledge to the players themselves. So yeah, I think the level's increasing every year.
So what do you think we need to do as a federation to continue that? What do you think we're lacking at the high school and junior high school categories or mini handball to really take the next step in level wise?
I think the big thing is you look at what Sherwood Park has been doing recently in years. A lot of their schools have junior high teams. And so they'll have a junior high team, and then a senior junior high team, and then a junior senior high school team, and then a senior high school team. And the progression of those kids, I think we've seen some of it, some flashes of it in the years. I know podcasts we've done previously, people like Maxi Palace and Kaya Stefaniak. But you'll see those kids who have been in grade 7 and have played for 6 years when they make grade 12, and just that knowledge that they have and the experience will be so much greater than my 2 years in high school. So
Yeah.
I think making sure that a lot of schools in Edmonton, high schools and junior high, have two teams that are well coached, that have full tryouts, and just making sure and getting that into more schools. I know junior high, Sherwood Park had a league, and there was a limited league in Edmonton last year,
Yeah.
but getting that into more of the Edmonton junior highs where they play more games is so invaluable. And you can see it at junior high provincials with the Sherwood Park teams. They're just light years ahead of everyone else.
Yeah, I agree. So now you're done high school. You you made the youth development team. You guys had a very talented and a very tall team and very athletic team. You guys ended up going to before we went to Germany. You guys went to youth nationals, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you guys finished second at youth nationals.
Yes, yeah.
Explain to me the process when you made it, going into youth nationals, your expectations, and then obviously being really successful at youth nationals, and then going to Germany and your expectations in Germany.
So going in, so just some background for some people. My youth development year, we had a U19 or U18 team and a U16 team. So I was a part of the U18 team, and leading up to youth nationals, we practiced a little bit with some of the elite players, and I remember kind of being in awe of both the guys and the girls teams. As much as I wanted to beat the guys teams, it was just like, oh, they're so good, and they've gone to Spain and Italy that year, and
Yeah.
just looking at them and like wanting to be like them. I remember every practice, it's we want to beat them, we want to do better than them. Every scrimmage, want to beat them, want to do better than
Yeah.
them. And so leading up, those are what the camps and practices were like. Going into youth nationals, I remember being really tired at the end of it. I remember it being a long tournament in terms of the games and the density. So multiple games in very few days. I remember we were super competitive with Sask 1 that year. We had some close games with them as well as Toba, and we were lucky enough to beat them. And then kind of got beat down a little bit by Alberta 1 in the final,
Yeah.
which was a little bit disappointing. But regardless, I think it was still a promising finish for our team. And so we were all like feeling, I think, pretty good going into Germany that year.
Yeah.
We're all like grade 10 or grade 11, grade 12s. We're pretty confident in ourselves. We go to Germany our first game, and we were playing, I believe it was a U16 team.
Yeah.
And we lost something like 27-8. Like, not close. They had a pivot who was like 6'3" and he was 13, and he caught everything. Yeah, it was a hit to the ego for sure, but I think necessary. And I remember you talking about it on the trip. It was like, you guys are cocky. And I intentionally picked that team, so you guys kind of got knocked down a peg. And I remember we had some of our best practices we'd had so far during the program after that game, just because everyone was like, okay, like, we need to work, right? We're not as good as these teams. So let's put in the work in those practices, and let's try and improve to get to that level.
Yeah. How was the rest of the trip?
I remember Germany being really enjoyable for the most part. I remember some points we played. There are obviously some tough games, but overall, very, very fun trip. The guys and the girls teams got along really well. I still have lots of friends from the girls team, lots of friends from the guys team. I felt like we improved a ton during handball and just really enjoyed the experience. It was my second time in Europe. I went earlier with a school trip, but both the experience of handball was super cool. Hanging out with some of the German teams was really awesome. And yeah, just being in Germany overall, both with the handball and with the cultural experience, was awesome. Super cool.
So you got home, and you're one that decided to put in the time to try to get better. What did you, when you came home from Germany, what was it about Germany that you were just like, okay, now it's time to focus and really commit myself to handball?
I would even say it's before Germany. So funnily enough, there was a guy on my development team who we went to high school with. And so we drove down to the first camp together, and we were discussing, oh, for the elite teams, you can't be 19. And we were both obviously going to turn 19 the following year, or 18. And that was the limit of the year. So we were like, okay, what's the next level for us? Because we want to continue with handball. And we set our sights on juniors from like the first camp. We like
Really?
even in development. So we were talking about, okay, here's what we have to do. This is the goal. We want to get to juniors. And I remember it was after juvenile nationals that year. There was a Facebook post or some sort of email inviting me to junior tryouts, and I was so excited. I'd seen Tyrell rep and really enjoyed. I talked to him a couple times, but yeah, I would say it was even before Germany. It was just a goal that I always wanted to just continue and push myself to higher levels. So it wasn't just after Germany; it was before finding that goal and just working harder to get to that goal.
Yeah. So your next trip was with Iceland, your last trip with the development. And when we get to Iceland, if people don't know, our program for development is a 6-7 month season where you do a trip in the summer and then a trip at Christmas time. And by the time you get to the Christmas trip, you kind of know the players that are really focused and the guys that are just like, hey, listen, I don't want to be here anymore, but I just want to go on the trip. Now, going in, you guys had from my view, I wasn't the coach, but I was there. It was mixed, 50-50, I would say, that really wanted to really play. Now, going into Iceland, you guys actually were pretty successful, weren't you, in Iceland?
Mm-hmm.
Then there was the one game against Fram.
Yes.
So overall, like going into it, and I know you knew that, I mean, you guys talk and people are like, yeah, I don't want to play after this. How do you go in preparing like that with like 50-50 kind of a group where half of them won't continue after that?
It's really difficult. I remember what I remember about that trip is as like an experience and the cultural aspect, it was wonderful. But in terms of the handball, it was, I want to say, like, depressing. It's very difficult when you have 7 people on the floor and you feel like you can depend on 3 of them. It's very difficult, especially in things like defense. And in a game like handball, you have to be united. You have to all have the same goal. You all have to work together. And if you don't, the results that we had in those games happened. We lost by 30 in a game. And we had like a real frank conversation in the dressing room. And it was, you guys either want to win or you don't. And we talked about it and it felt like, okay, we're going to do better the next game. We lost by 40. Like, it's very difficult when you all aren't united, right? And the Iceland trip was longer. It was 2 weeks or close to. Yeah. We're practicing, I would say, every other day. We have games every day, every other day. So it's a lot of handball, right? If you haven't been training, which, like you said, half the team wasn't, it's difficult, right? It's a difficult trip, but that's tough, right? It's tough to have half your team that's committed and half your team that isn't.
And the thing with it too, it's like you said, you lost by quite a bit, but you guys shouldn't have lost by that much.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is,
yeah.
The thing is, like when I was saying with the Fram game, because I was reffing that game, and you can see that half the guys were running back on defense. So at halftime, I just stopped and said to the coach, "I'm like, you get them all off. We'll bring in the U16s," and you could just see at that point the majority, some of them just didn't care. And what do you think, as like you coach some youth development some years? What do you think how to fix that issue from trip to trip?
The issue where people don't necessarily want to be
Yeah,
there?
because after the first trip, because we make it very demanding the first trip, right? You practice every day, you have games, we make sure you play good teams, and then because then you come back and you're motivated or you don't want to be motivated. Like, how do you what do you think is the best thing to keep those players motivated since you went through the program?
That's a tough question. I think it's difficult for a multitude of reasons. I think you're dealing with teenagers, right? And it's a very pivotal time in life for a lot of them, especially if they're older, going to university, making decisions with life. So I think in a span of the youth development program, 6-7 months, things can change quite drastically. I think potentially, like in our year, you had 2 teams, potentially in the first trip. And depending on the players, depending on the circumstances, maybe cut it down to 1 team for the next trip. Keeping that element of competition, I think, is super important because I think after, especially because there's a significant gap, at least when I went through it, about 4 months or so between the first trip and the second trip, you almost get a sense of entitlement, right? Like, oh, I'm on the Alberta team. Oh, I'm going to Iceland in 4 months, right? Like, and you start to like get full of yourself a little bit. And maybe if you incorporate that aspect of, oh, well, maybe I'm not, right? Like maybe I'm not in this top 12 or top 15, whatever it is, right? And working and pushing and constantly improving, because then the people who want to compete and the people who really want to be there will be there. And it's a privilege. It's not your right, right? Just because you made the team in April doesn't mean you go on the trip in December. I am potentially incorporating like maybe more one-on-one meetings in like October, checking in, being like, hey, where are you at? Remember Germany, that was tough. Iceland will be more difficult, right? We'll expect more commitment from you guys. So I don't know. I'm not sure.
No, I mean, those are all valid points. It's just funny you said those meetings because, I mean, we've coached together. We've been in meetings together when you're coaching and I'm just there. How many of the players don't tell you the truth, though?
Oh, 100%.
Right? How many of them have said after a trip, I'm 100%, my goal is to be in Europe? Every kid. And then, so it's a difficult thing. But the way, like, I look at it is that the first trip, you have to the more people that go, the better, because then you have like a big base.
Yeah.
And like your group, right? You had a big base, and then every cycle, people dropped out. But if you look at the senior team now, from that U16 in your team, the majority of the seniors are from that generation.
Yeah.
Right? You, Kenneth, Blaze, Jackson was on there. You know, like there's players on there. So it's like it's good to, like, I agree with you 100%. And that's why, like, we've started now only doing one trip instead of the two trips. It's because after that trip, you could always offer another trip. And the kids that want to do it will get to do it. It just, at that point, I think you're right, where people lose that interest. They don't want to work as hard anymore. Or a lot of kids that, you know, come out from smaller towns are so successful at home that when they get on a trip like that and they don't win many games, then they're like, well, I don't want to do this. So it's a difficult thing. So now you join the juniors, correct? Or did you go to elite?
Yeah. I did juniors. I started juniors in between both development trips. So I started in September, and I did juniors, and then I did developments, and then I did elite that summer.
So then your next trip was with the juniors. You went to junior nationals.
Yeah, we did a trip in the U.S., I believe, first, but yeah, junior nationals was the culmination of it.
Do you remember what trip you went to in the States? Was it
California?
California?
Went to Cal Cup. Yeah, we went to California.
Cup. Yeah. That's a year we lost for the first time in 5 years.
Yes.
And you'll see in some podcasts coming up, I've had a couple of Saskatchewan, a coach and a player, saying that's their biggest win as a coach or as a player, which is right, like, good for them. They deserved it. Going in, we're very confident in Alberta that we're the dominant province in the country. And I'm sure when you were going into the juniors, you probably hear, we're going to win. We're going to win. We don't lose. We don't lose. Alberta never loses. Going into that nationals, and you saw Saskatchewan the year before and you beat them. How was that tournament, and what were your expectations? And when it was all done, what were your, like, when you reevaluated it, what were your thoughts?
I think going into the trip, so juniors was a whole new level. So if high school's here, development's here, juniors is off the screen. In terms of expectations, in terms of quality of players that you play against. So our team was relatively new that year, so there's a lot of learning curves that happened through the season. So moving into junior nationals, super excited. We got to go back to Regina, so 2 years in a row, which was really fun. Compared to the development trips, I felt like everyone on that team was bought in. Everyone was there for the right reasons. We all wanted to be there. We all wanted to go and be successful. I think, like you were saying, the first time in 5 years, for me at least, that kind of played in the back of my head of, oh, well, we don't want to be the ones to mess this up. A little bit, but going in, obviously you want to win. You hear, like you said, all the talk, oh, Alberta's dominant. But that's the expectation, right? And holding yourself to that high standard, I think, is important in a lot of senses. So we go in, compete. We have a couple close games. We play Sask 1 the first time. We lose by, I think it was 2. And we come out of that game, have a game plan. I know we did a couple film sessions with you and our coaching staff, and we just kind of talked about it a little bit. Go into the final with a bunch of confidence. Like, okay, we got a game plan. We know how to break this down. First half, David Jingles, big pastry, my favorite pivot, goes off. So I think he had 8 goals in the first half. Dominant. We have a 7 at the end of the first half. David's been on fire. Tyrell gives the 7 to David. And then there's a contested call where David hits the goalie in the face, according to the refs. They believe it's intentional. He gets a red card. He's kicked off the team, or he's kicked out of the game.
Red card,
So we had one pivot on our team because Noah Parmenter had to go to his grad, and the other pivots got injured or weren't there. So we
Sorry,
have to
just
sit
before you
in.
continue, what
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know is a lot of our players weren't there because it was grad weekend.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So go on, sorry.
Mhm. Yeah. Anyway, so we go into the second half, and we obviously not having a pivot is difficult for us. But we have I think it's a 12 or 14-minute stretch. I haven't watched the game, so I haven't counted. But
Yeah.
where we don't score, we like to think of it as, oh, we got all the right shots, but we just shot at the same spot, and the goalie just kept doing the same thing. I'm sure Sask, if you ask this question to them, will say their goalie was on fire and he stopped everything.
That's what they say. Yeah.
Right. And your perspective obviously colors whatever happened. We didn't score. The goalie made a ton of saves.
Yeah.
They pulled ahead. We tried to make it close towards the end, ended up losing by 2.
Yeah.
And that's probably the saddest I've been after a handball game. We were all crushed. We had a quick conversation, then we all had a good cry for about 10 minutes. That was tough for sure. But those are the things that give you fuel, right? If you're training in the off season and running and doing whatever, working out, you think about those games. You think about how you felt after those games. You think about seeing the other team win when you think it should have been yourself, and that's what gives you fuel, and that's what makes you better.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think it was overall like that tournament was. I think that was like the restart of getting everyone pushed to work harder. Because even with Tyrell, and I've talked to Tyrell about, is that I gave him a lot of trouble after that weekend because I was in a room with him and I was just there as just as a support staff. And I told him and the other coach, Parker, I'm like, you guys weren't preparing for that game. You guys were on your phones texting, and it was, I think it was the whole group that was just like, well, we always win when it comes down to it. So it was a difficult situation, but I think it was needed in the program.
I agree. And full credit to Tyrell. I'm sure this was with you. The first thing he said after that game, this one's on me, right? We all have to work harder, starting with myself. So that's tough as a coach, and I totally respect that.
And so you said earlier on, and I think this is what a bunch of like the board talks about a lot. When you go from development to juniors and elite, in girls we have a consistent base that continues, but in guys it drops off. And we always like try to brainstorm what's the reason for that. And you said it was a huge difference in level, but do you also think it was in coaching? Not saying your youth coaches, all the coaches did a fantastic job, but did you find like when you took that next step that your commitment was so much more, that everything was so much more, that coming from development, it was like almost a new stage where you're like, whoa, this is like overwhelming almost?
I think it is to a certain extent. I think in terms of what you're talking about, the difference in coaching.
Yeah.
Like you said, all respect to all my development coaches. Really enjoyed them. Great experience. I think there is, at least at that point, I think there was a different level in coaching. I think Tyrell's a great coach, so I think it's hard to compete. I think in terms of the commitment, it's a lot different just because you have weekly practices, right? And it's not, with development, the commitment slightly less just because you have a camp a month.
Yeah.
Right.
And one club practice a week if your club is you're around your area.
Right. And the club practices are very different than provincial practices. There's a different level in terms of intensity, in terms of commitment. So I think like you're touching the handball more, that contributes to the increased level.
Yeah.
I think the commitment makes everyone more serious, right? I'm putting in all this time. We might as well be successful, right? I'm not coming here so we get crushed when we go to a tournament, right? I'm devoting 10, 15 hours a week to this because I want to be better. And if you don't want to be better, then why are you here, right? It's more of an attitude of that, I feel like. In terms of the jump between development and juniors, I think it's difficult. I think considering now what we were talking about, handball starting younger, my experience is relatively atypical.
Yeah.
I think it's less common now for a 17-year-old to go to start development as their first handball experience and then go right to juniors. I think the buffer of elite kind of helps with that. But I still think there's a bit of a jump. But
So
I'm not in. Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
sorry. So what do you think it is like that we need to do as a federation to be able to our retention rate is better with the guys in that jump, because that's where it goes, because people play development, people play elite, and then when they hit juniors and it's like, okay, it's 2 practices a week, but you should also be doing TAS, which
Mhm.
is at 7 in the morning on a Monday, and you need to do a club practice, minimum a club practice a week too, plus
Right.
then you have a weekend camp.
Right.
And so now people are like, okay, I'm used to 1 practice a week with a camp a month. Now I'm practicing 4 or
Mhm.
5 times a week, plus a camp, plus now I'm playing on 2 club league teams. I have to play on a senior club and a junior club. What do you think is we need to do to keep that retention rate?
I'm not sure because the interesting comment or I guess difference is that we have a good retention rate with girls,
Yeah,
but in our guys program it's less. I'm not entirely sure
yeah,
why. Um, like my instinct would be, oh well, you need more of a ramp up, so there needs to be more scaffolding. So there's a section in between development over here and juniors over here, where you have 1 practice and a weekend camp, and then 4 practices a week and a weekend camp. Maybe
yeah,
there's an in between where it's 2 practices a week and a weekend camp.
yeah,
Like, but like you said, it works in girls. So in terms of guys, I'm really not
mhm,
sure. It might be you've been the consistent coach from development to juniors for the last couple of years,
yeah,
and that probably contributes to it. So you have a consistent culture, a consistent voice. Maybe coming from development, you're used to this coach, and then there's a new coach that you're unfamiliar with, you're less comfortable with, you're less
yeah,
likely to reach out to and ask questions. I don't know.
yeah.
I think it differs per person, right? In terms of why people quit, it's not uniform, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I think it's expectations too, because like again, my as a coach, my expectations from the time the development is you need to be 100% committed, and anyone with potential, like I bring them up right away. So it's like
Mhm.
when we're together, you have 14-year-olds training with our seniors.
Right,
While in guys, we don't have any of those young players that are training with our older.
right.
So yeah, it's a long conversation, and what we're trying this year with the men is now we have like 19 guys on the senior program now, because we took like in right now in the practices we have the first time in like 10 years there's 3 times the amount of girls or guys than there is girls
Right.
in the practices, because we decided we got to start bringing younger players into our senior program to start building that in between stage. So yes, they
Yeah.
need to be a part of it. They're going to develop, and yeah, if they're not ready, they're going to need to sit on a bench like everyone needs to do. And then again, they can still do junior nationals or competitions, but be with the senior team as well. So I think we're going to try to change it a little bit on the men's side to just bring in that more of that middle piece, like you said. We'll
Hmm.
see if that's going to help us with the retention rate a little bit more.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, for sure.
yeah. So going ahead now, you've traveled to Europe. Now you're really getting involved in handball. I mean, your group of guys, when you guys lost to Saskatchewan, the only thing you guys cared about was next season and beating them. So throughout the year, I mean, you went on trips to Europe. It just we've talked with so many players about the same kind of trips, so I'm not going to bring up so much Europe. Uh, but you guys really worked, and your goal was national championships gold. So you guys were working your butts off. And early in the season, I didn't see a lot of. I talked to Tyrell, and you guys heard the rumors. Mike thinks the younger guys are better than the juniors, and uh, we get ready for nationals, and 3-4 months before we find out, no, less than that, maybe 2 months, Quebec's not coming. Okay,
Mm.
okay, guys, Quebec's not coming, but we'll have Manitoba, Saskatchewan, this. Oh, Manitoba has decided not to come. So now it's Alberta and one Saskatchewan team. So we're putting in 3 teams. Or no, we only put in 2 teams, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it was
Alberta put in 2 teams and Sask had 1, I believe.
okay. So in that season, you guys worked your butts off. And again, I credit the team and I credit Tyrell as a coach and Craig as a coach. That your first half of the season, I didn't see much development, and I was really worried about that our younger guys are going to be able to beat you. And then in the second half, I didn't see you guys much. And then you guys went into national championships. And kudos to you guys, because no matter what, how discouraging it was, your ultimate goal was to win, and you didn't care it was there, and you wanted a revenge on Saskatchewan. So saying it, no games were close for you. I think you guys beat Alberta by 30, Saskatchewan by 30. Tell me that process and what made you guys work so hard and keep your focus for that nationals and your results and what you thought about your results.
I think it's interesting, right? Because you brought up the first half of the season. It wasn't, you didn't see those results, right? Yeah. And our first trip that we went to Chicago wasn't a great trip, right? We weren't super successful. So like around January, I remember thinking, I was like, what if we don't figure this out? Like, what if it doesn't click? Like, we're putting in all this work, we're putting in all this time. What happens? And the second half of the year happens, and like you said, everything just kind of clicks and falls into place, and we get a lot better, right? And like you said, nationals wasn't close. It's hard to point to one thing. I just remember everyone being super committed, right? Like that year, we didn't have a large team. We had, I think it was 8, 9 out players, and 3 goals. Yeah. So I remember that being the talk of like, oh, can you guys maintain your level of work with 8 out players?
Do you remember? I kept on arguing with you guys and Tyrell. I'm like, we're going to need to pick up a couple players. And you guys were adamant. We do not want anyone.
Right. Well, and it's the idea of like, I've worked with these guys for 6 months. Let me finish this, right? Let us show what work we've done together. And I think we picked up one player from the younger team, but he slotted in perfectly. But at the end of the day, we didn't have a big team. And the work just showed, right? Everyone was committed. People were spectacular. Like, people were the best they've ever been to that point. It was, our best tournament as a team by far to that point. We were dominant. Like, nothing was close. And like you were saying, teams were dropping out. We didn't care. Like, it sucks, but Sask was still there. And that's what we wanted, right? We wanted to beat Sask. We wanted to play that.
And like going into it, I was betting people, oh, the younger guys are going to beat them. Just wait. And then you guys beat them because it was like, what, triple round robin or double round robin and then a final?
Yeah, it was double round robin.
And then a second versus third, and then the winner would play. And I was like, yes, they won the first 2 games, but they're not going to be able to keep it up for another 60 minutes. I think the most dominant game was the finals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and it was, I remember we had a timeout 10, 12 minutes left. And Craig Fisher, who was our coach, was, all right, we're up by 20. Let's get to 30, right? Like, and that's just the mindset of let's crush everybody. It was awesome. Loved it.
And that's why I think we're not well liked in other provinces, is because I think our mentality is we work hard. If we can beat you by 30, we'll beat you by 30. It's not our job to develop your province. So,
like we were talking about earlier, our teams got crushed. We went to Europe, we got crushed, but we put in the work. So we want to show our work and show that we can do that.
And that's the thing is I think people think like we just magically these players just show up and they're good. I mean, like the players and the coaches and everything, we put in time, and people don't understand the beatings we take. When we go to Europe, we don't set up, like we'll have a couple games where we know that our teams can compete, but early on we make sure you guys get beat down so we know who's going to stick with it and push themselves. So people don't understand that. They think that we just are lucky. So at that point, sorry, do you have something to say?
No, sorry.
Um, Now a big thing was at that time was you guys were getting to the point where you're good enough to play on the national team. The reason Manitoba and Quebec didn't show up is they decided to have a national team event the same time as our nationals without CTHF saying, "Hey, let's move the national championships." Uh, so you guys decided as a group that you guys are not going to try out for the national team because you made a commitment to the provincial team. At that point, were you pretty like, and then seeing there was only three teams, were you guys pretty discouraged at going, "Hey, I gave up trying out for the national team to play in this tournament"?
I think I wouldn't necessarily say disappointment, right? Because the guys on the national team, like I don't know really much of the guys from Quebec that are my age, or the guys from Manitoba that are my age. I know them a little bit better now, but especially at that point, I didn't really know them, right? So the attitude, like I was saying earlier, of competing with these guys that you've worked with for months is much more of a motivator. Obviously, national team is still a goal. It's still something I'd love to do. It's still something that I would like to pursue. But in terms of missing that tournament for national team, eh, not really something that I don't think a lot of us seriously thought of. Not something that was a goal for any of us. Our goal was to win. And our goal was to be dominant that year and be dominant together. So yeah, I wouldn't say at that point national team. It wasn't disappointing at all. Yeah.
So you, at this point too, now you're playing on the senior provincial team. You got asked to go to you won gold with the senior guys that year.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like we just talked about, you were a young player that was brought up, as we saw a lot of potential in you, and you got minutes when was available for you. You weren't experienced enough to play a lot of minutes, but then you got to go to Pan Am Club Championships, which we'll talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think a tough thing about that trip was that it was the day you guys left 8 hours after the finals of national championships.
Yeah.
Your goalie tore his hamstring.
Yeah.
You're probably your best defender tore his Achilles,
Yep.
and you're getting on a plane.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, that's a tough situation. But how was that experience playing at the Pan Am Club Championships?
It was incredible. So the way I thought of it and kind of still think of it as a time was like almost second development trip.
Yeah,
So your development trip is very much like, oh, see what you can do, see what other players in handball can do, see how high the level is here.
yeah,
Pan Am clubs seemed like very similar. The highest level games I'd seen, the highest level players I'd seen. All the other teams in the tournament, I believe, were professional, or some were maybe semi-professional. But for the most part, most of the players got paid. There's a lot of players that are on the Brazilian national team, some on the Chilean national team. I believe there's some from Argentina as well. So, like you said, being a younger player at the time, an eye-opening experience for sure. Seeing the level and seeing how high level handball is played, right? A lot of that year on the senior team was very much learning to swim with the sharks in a lot of ways,
yeah.
right? Learning the intensity, learning the level, learning the focus that you need to have, the communication, everything. So that Pan Am Club's an incredible experience. Awesome. One of the best, I think, of my handball career.
Um, so going forward, I mean, you played another year with the senior provincial team, and then this year, Tyrell and I, in a haste decision at Myrtle Beach, I forgot about Myrtle Beach. So
Mm.
now going into that next year, you guys went to Myrtle Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, how was that experience? And the weekend before at Junior Nationals.
So the weekend before Junior Nationals is my last year of juniors. A lot of the players on that team were the same from the year that we dominated.
Yeah.
More teams this year. Manitoba and Sask were there. It was a really good tournament. It was different because my last year, right? So some of the older players on the team were me and some of my teammates like Kenneth, Dakota.
But you lost some
Um,
players. You lost David Jingles, Jared Zielinski were too old. Noah Nadell was too old.
Right. I guess that's what I mean, is that
Okay.
it was,
Okay.
I guess, the first year where I was like the oldest or part of the older group
Okay. Okay.
of players on the team. So in a lot of ways, the onus was kind of on us. Granted, we had like younger players who were great contributors. Like Noah was awesome for us that year. Cole, as a cocky rookie, was great that year. But yeah, it was a good tournament as well. In the final, we went, I think it was 3 overtimes. We were down one with, I think it was 15 seconds left. I threw a skip
Sorry, you
pass
were
to
down.
Cole.
You were down 4 goals with a minute
Yeah,
left, a minute and 20
yes,
left or something.
yeah. It
Yeah.
was something like that. It was a series of improbable comebacks because we were
Yeah.
down, I think, 4 with a minute and 20 left in regulation,
Yeah.
and then we were down 4 in the first overtime, and then we were down 2 in the second overtime, and eventually pulled it back and won that game. But credit to Manitoba, they played great.
Yeah.
Yeah, overall good tournament. It was nice to get 2 in a row,
Yeah.
2 of 3 for my junior career.
Yeah.
Um, and then moving on to senior nationals, we added some players that have been practicing with us all year. So like Dylan Chenove, Mark Gordeluck came with us. David Jingles came with us to Myrtle Beach at U.S. Nationals. We had a good tournament. We're very successful. Our pivots were dominant. We ended up making it to the final. Beat a bunch of teams and played a really good Houston team that we lost to earlier in the tournament. And ended up beating them, unfortunately. Nothing was easy that year. We won in 3 overtimes, I think, as well. So we just wanted to drag it out and give Tyrell a bit of a heart attack each game. But no, it was great to win that tournament. Another highlight for sure. It was another great team. It was yeah, no, really good tournament for sure.
What, and I've asked a lot of people this. Now you've gone to U.S. Nationals and Canadian Nationals. What is the difference, and why do you think our players are more wanting to go to USA Nationals?
I think a lot of it is it's nice to play different people, right? Like the Nationals, like you were saying, where it's us and the junior team from Alberta and the Sask team, right? It's still a good tournament. It's still good competitive games, but it's 2 teams that we played before, right? I know most of the players. I know a lot of their tendencies. It's really nice to play new teams, to have new competition, to play against different styles, see what works out. I think in terms of competition, I guess senior nationals for Canada is still high level for sure,
Yeah.
but I think it's to some degree it depends on which teams come. Whereas at U.S. nationals, you have 15 teams. We were in the open division that year. A lot of those teams were pretty solid, right? And you have the elite division. Those teams are really good. We played those teams this year. So I think it's the variety of competition and it's the level. You also look at the exposure. USA Team Handball, huge exposure. Very like well-funded organization. If you win, great exposure. It seems it's just a more fun event to go to
Yeah.
for those reasons and more. It's just I'd say it's just more fun experience for sure.
I agree with you because, like, that's the thing is I think like there's no still better rivalry than a Quebec Alberta game, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't know if Quebec's going to show up. You don't know
Right.
what team they're going to come with, and when you win, you'd be lucky if it shows up on the CTHF website.
Hmm.
Like, and so I think as a player or as a coach, it gets frustrating when you put in time and you win a national championships, and then I'll bet you can't go online right now on the CTHF site and see who won nationals 2 years ago. So it kind of takes away from like, you know, the enjoyment of winning. Well, when you guys won at last year in the open division, it was on the website. Team Handball News wrote about it. You guys got points to now make it to the elite side. So I just think it's, yeah, like you said, it just more exposure to it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Um, Now that night, Myrtle Beach, you guys win. I still don't know how it ended up, but talk, everyone's hanging out, talk. Tyrell's like, I think I want to play again, but I'm only going to play if you coach, Mike. And I said, well, I only coach if you play. And we were both, I think, I didn't want to coach and he didn't want to play, but somehow it ended up that he played and I coached.
Mhm.
And so then we decided that, and Tyrell came back. Now, this season, obviously, it ended short. What were your thoughts of now with Tyrell being coached by him and then playing with him? What are the difference that you saw in playing with him compared to coaching? And what did you like about it or dislike about it?
Um, I'd say the difference is as a coach, he kind of forces himself in a lot of ways to like be more extroverted. I think Tyrell's kind of a naturally introverted dude. Just
Yeah,
kind of keeps to himself. Will hang out in his room and watch anime or cartoons, whatever he wants to do.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but as a coach, he kind of intentionally like inserts himself in conversations and like gets to know people a little bit more. So I think you kind of get to see a different side of himself, which I mean, as someone who's also been a coach, I understand. I'm different as a coach than I am as a teammate. So it's cool to see that other side of him. I think having him as a coach for 3 years, he's someone I really respect. Um, so I really enjoyed having him as a teammate. It's fun to compete with him in practices.
yeah.
It's fun to, yeah, those are enjoyable. I really enjoyed that. Um, yeah, I think it was really cool. I hope he continues to play this year, but we'll
No,
see what happens,
no,
right?
he's playing.
He is for sure.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. He refuses to do something in the summertime. That's it. But he's back in September.
Oh, okay,
September 1st, he's back. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. He's playing
nice.
100%.
Okay,
We've
okay.
already talked about it and everything like that. It's Tyrell. He just like in the summer, he just doesn't want to do anything, even though we've had 8 month summer. Uh, so now, and I'm not talking like our styles of like how I push more than Tyrell as a coach compared to he's more laid back. But in our styles of coaching, like practices, games, like adapting in the games, changing lines, pre-game talks about how we're going to play. Do Tyrell and I coach the same, or are we very different coaches when it comes to that stuff?
I would say different in mainly one way, and it's just you are much more detail oriented. So that extends to multiple things.
Yeah,
So game plans. This player is going to do this. Here's exactly what we're going to do to stop that player. Right? You have situation A, B, C.
yeah,
We have it all figured out.
yeah,
In practices, here's the skill we're working on. It's exactly this. You have to do this, right? And it's doing the skill properly in that specific way.
yeah,
Tyrell's more of a big picture person. So I think in terms of like practices, it's he'll give you options and say, oh, well, you could do this or this or this. And he kind of leaves it up to you to figure out, I think, in a lot more ways.
yeah.
I personally, as a player, prefer your style of coaching. If I was given the option, I obviously like both of you as
Yeah,
coaches.
yeah, yeah.
But I personally want more of a detail oriented. I want someone to tell me exactly what I need to do in this scenario. I think it depends on what you like as a player, but that would be the main difference is the focus on the details.
Yeah, I think people want my details and his calmness.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, maybe a
Yeah.
happy medium between the two.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's funny though, because when I watch him coach, I'm like, does he even care? Because half the time he has his hood on, and he just like it's like he's just relaxing in overtime. It's quite funny. But um, so this year, I think we were having an outstanding year, and I think like we've had a lot of talks in the USA, and pretty much people have said it's Alberta, Cal Heat, New York, or New York that's going to win the U.S. national championships, the elite side. I
Hmm.
think we were gunning for it, and then dates kind of got affected, so we weren't sure we were going to be able to go, um, which was sad because I think we could have done stuff. And what people don't understand is our average age is like 21 or 22 years old, and I think around there, maybe 23 or something compared to the other teams. But with COVID, like, are you someone with when it happened where you're like, hey, it is what it is, we'll start up next year, or was it for a little bit like kind of a big downer that our season was done?
I guess for me, it's more of like obviously disappointment, right? Like it's a similar thing. You work hard for this goal
Yeah,
for 6 months
yeah,
at that point. But at the same time, handball is a sport,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And as
Yeah,
much as we all enjoy that sport and it's super important to all of us, there are other things that are more important and supersede that, right? So for me, my mindset was very much there's nothing we can do about it, but we always want to do the thing that's safest for everyone,
yeah,
for ourselves, for other teams, for the spectators. So I was also of a mindset of it is what it is. It's not something that we can control.
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah, I'm just kind of
Hmm.
curious of what your thoughts are. Obviously, it's nothing we can control. I mean,
Right.
it's just crazy that it was like exact day that like our crazy handball season
Yeah.
starts. I was I went and picked up the Sal Cup trophy, the shirt for the
Mhm.
tournament that was starting the next morning, and that was the day that it was crazy for the next 8 weeks. It's just
Yeah.
crazy how it was like, so it's just a little bit crazy when you look back at it. But you're right, right? It's there's nothing no one could do about it, and obviously, I don't think we would want to be in the States right now doing anything. So
No, not at all.
no, no. But so what are your like motivations now with handball? Has it changed since COVID, or do you still have the same motivations to be the best you can to play national team?
I think they are the same. Um, I think there's kind of caveats, right? It's like I'd like to do this if this is safe, right? So obviously, I think the goals are very similar.
Yeah,
I'd like to play Alberta. I'd like to play for the national team. The only thing is if it's safe to do so, right? So those are just my concerns. I'd say the goals stay the same, but there's just extra considerations with those goals.
yeah, of course. I mean,
Yeah,
you're still not like I mean, yeah. Who knows what's gonna happen? But yeah,
exactly.
I'm just kind of curious about like if you still have your handball goals that you want to still reach the top you can no matter like when it's ready to do so.
Right, for sure. I think it's still a goal of mine to play in Europe.
Yeah,
I'd still like to do that. I would still like to play for a club in Europe. Like you said, I'm taking education, so I think there's a chance that I could potentially pair that as well with my handball experience to playing in Europe. That
yeah,
would be a dream for me. Yeah, for sure. Playing national team, playing competitions with national team, playing national
yeah,
team for going to Pan Am Games.
yeah,
All of those are goals, right? That hasn't changed in any respect. I
yeah.
don't think. Yeah, I believe the goals are still very similar.
Yeah, yeah. It just, when you have a big break like this,
Hmm.
people reflect and kind of look, is this something I still want? Is this something that I don't want anymore? Right. So it's just a passion within each individual of what they want out of it.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so last few questions is if you can remember your favorite trip, which trip was it out of all the trips you've done with handball?
My answer to this used to be a no-brainer for the Pan American Championships in Brazil.
Okay.
Um, just because of the experience, it's really hard to name one trip. I think the further you get from development trips, the more fondly you look back on them. The further you get from elite trips, the more fondly you look back on them.
Yeah.
Last summer when we had elite teams going to Partilla Club, I loved that trip.
Yeah.
I remember that trip so fondly. The team that we went there with, it's really difficult to pick one.
Yeah.
If I was to pick one, I probably U.S. Nationals
Yeah.
last year. Just in terms of the team that we had, I felt we were all on the same page. Some of my best friends are on that team.
Yeah.
We had a ton of success. It wasn't easy. We had to fight through. It was a difficult tournament, but it was a really satisfying and successful tournament nonetheless. So yeah, I would say that if I were to pick.
It's funny the way you said it, because when the farther you get away, because then the memories show up on your social media, and that's when people that don't play handball anymore that contact me, like
Mhm.
Iceland, always on New Year's. People from 4 or 5 years ago, Mike, you wrecked New Year's for us because the fireworks in Iceland were the most amazing things I've ever seen. Or hey, Mike, thanks for that Partilica trip 4 years ago. It's still something I'll never forget. So it's so, you said it so well, that it's when the farther you get away from the trip, like longer time, is you look back and remember all those memories.
I think like the handball is obviously very important
Yeah,
and the reason why you're there, but it's the memories of the people that you're there with, right? Like I said, some of my best friends now I was on those development trips with. I those the nights in the hostels where we were struggling to find Wi-Fi and sweating when there was no AC. I remember those so fondly, right?
yeah,
We're all crowding around this one little space because this is where we can get our Snapchat update. It's
yeah,
it's the little things, right? It's obviously the big beautiful moments like New Year's in Iceland, but it's the little things. It's just being with each other and
yeah,
experiencing the same things.
yeah. What
hmm
about now? Now you've traveled a little bit with development as a coach. What's your favorite memory as a coach with the development program? Like, is
Uh,
there a group that you just felt like you bonded well, or a trip that you just had a blast?
I think the last when I was the head coach, so when we went to Germany
Yeah,
just this last year, some of the players were holdovers from the previous years.
yeah,
And I really enjoyed coaching them, had good relationships with them from the previous year,
yeah,
continued on those. Had some new players that I really enjoyed coaching and being on those trips with. As well, just I think those were really personally challenging for me, and I learned lots on that trip, just about me, about leadership, about like how to organize 20 kids who need to find a bus, like just things that you figure out when you're dead tired and need to get these kids somewhere. It's
yeah,
it's it's a lot of growing experiences, and it's great times as well, but it's the personal growth as well as the happy
yeah.
memories that I think I remember that trip most fondly for.
And it's funny, eh? Because like everyone always like, you, Mike, you have the best job in the world. All you do is just travel and this and that. And I'm like, you guys have no clue what it is when you travel with people. And then always when like you guys, like a lot of the players that are coaches in development come from the program. So,
Mhm.
they go from like you having just a blast. You go to sleep when you want. When we tell you to go to sleep, you
Yeah.
wake up, your day is planned. And then
hmm
going from like, okay, now I'm the one that has to do all this in any single issue. And it was
Yeah.
funny. It was like, I think 2 nights ago, I was talking to someone. I think it was at handball. And we were talking about the Wilson Mike argument in the track, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, who you have your way, I have my way, but it just those are the things you grow from,
hmm Yeah.
right?
It's
Yeah,
talking about those trips to like people who haven't been coaches and have also done development trips. It's way more tiring as a coach,
yeah,
right? Like you think as a player, oh, I'm practicing all the time and playing all the time. The coach just sits on the bench,
yeah,
but you're on all the time. It's
yeah,
always, okay, we're done this. What's the next thing? We're done this. What's the next thing? Okay,
yeah.
the kids are in bed. Let's plan the next day.
Okay.
Let's get up earlier than them. Like it's everything. You don't get a rest for a week and a half, 2 weeks. That's
And
the
the thing is,
most
like, people
exhausted I've been.
like, and I'm like, I make sure you guys work. So like, when they go to bed at 11, that's
hmm
when we start making our practice plan. And the practice
Right.
plan is okay. Tell me what you want to work on. Now come up with the drills, and then I'll be like, okay, explain to me why this is going to help them in this situation and this. So it's not a 30-minute practice plan. It ends up being
Right.
130, and
hmm
then as coaches, the younger coaches then get together and have some. Now you're just with your own age. So now you
hmm
guys, you talk for an hour, and now it's two
Right.
thirty in the morning. Oh, but I
Yeah.
got to be up 2 hours before
Yeah.
because I got to make sure that this is ready, and then you
hmm
realize you're getting 3 hours of sleep a night.
hmm
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's no, it's an experience unlike anything else.
Yeah.
It's wonderful, but also incredibly exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
you come back as a player, and you're like, like I love coaching, but I love being a handball player.
Yeah,
A little more.
100%. I think I said the same thing to you at the end of that trip. Was coaching's fun, but being a player is more
Yeah.
fun.
And always the ones now after practice or after a trip, the ones that always make sure to say thank you are the ones that were coaches.
Yeah. Oh,
'Cause-
because you understand, right? You
yeah,
totally get it how tired that coach is. Yeah, it's a whole new
exactly,
appreciation.
exactly. Do you have a favorite game that you remember that it was a memory that you'll always talk about, a moment in a game or a full game?
It's I think of it in more in moments. Um, I don't know necessarily a favorite game. Like for the junior nationals where we're super dominant. After that time out with Craig, the most fun I've had in a handball game because free and easy and just absolutely domination. So much fun. But at the same time, games where we're competing. This year, we went to New York and we played California.
You mean
One of the
Chicago?
most intense games. Sorry. Oh yeah,
Chicago.
Chicago. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, when we play in California, one of the most intense games I've ever been in. Super fun. Similarly, we went to California 4 months later
Yeah.
in the final. Really fun. Did I play the best game I had? Probably not, but it's fun for different reasons. I don't have one game that stands out to me. I have moments and there's things that you enjoy from every game, I guess, is how I look at it.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Um, I don't know if you listened to. I had an Instagram story with the coach from California,
Mm-hmm.
and he's gone on a couple podcasts, and he's talked about Alberta a lot. And they say that was the turning point in their trip. They claim that they took us lightly and they weren't prepared, and I kind of claim that no, we knew we were going to play you again, so we didn't throw the defense at you that we needed to, and then when we did, you guys did not know what to do.
Right.
But they say that that was the time that they knew they had to work. But I think that also shows like your generation of going from open to now beating the national championships in a 5 month span. So that I think that was a huge accomplishment. And I remember a lot of you guys said your one goal is you still want to beat Cal Heat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Like I playing them, like obviously there are other great teams in the US, New York Athletic Academy, New York City, who we haven't played really, but California for me, I've played that team so many times. We've been to their tournament so many times. It's just that's a team that I always want to beat. I know their players. I played them a bunch.
yeah.
I just really want to beat them. They're a great team. They're well coached. They're experienced. It's a team that I always want to play, and I'm really excited to play and really excited to beat.
Well, I can tell you, I don't think the chances are good we're going to be going to California this year to play in that tournament. I would say it's 99.99% sure we will not
Yeah,
be in the USA this year.
probably not.
I would say there's a really good chance unless there's something special that happens. If there's herd immunity in the States.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Or a vaccine comes out.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
um, and so your goals are still, like I said, you said it's national team is something you still really want to do, and you just want to pursue it and keep working as hard as you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like seeing people. I listened to the podcast with Greg Chauvet, a guy I played with, someone that I really look up to and respect, and what he's done in Europe is something that I think is amazing. And that experience and that he talked about how being mentally tough and you start as the last man on the bench and you have to fight for every minute of playing time. That sounds really interesting. I like the idea of that as a challenge. Similarly to national team, it's a new challenge, right? Like, and that's what really gets me excited is challenges and constantly being like, okay, here's this next level. How are we gonna do? Right? Let's keep pushing ourselves. Let's keep improving. So, yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
Good, good. Well, I had the pleasure of coaching you this year, and sadly it ended. But I think you're a player that's come from in 3 years. I think now you played handball. 3 years,
Three or
is it?
four, yeah.
3, 4 years.
3 or 4, I think. Yeah.
That you're the person that you can say it's, hey, listen, look at where someone started and just what their work and their sacrifices they've made, where they've accomplished. I don't know if you know this, but coaches that I know in Europe, when I put up like videos of Taz, and they'll write to me, they're like, "You guys practice at 7 in the morning?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "We have professional players or players that are trying to be professional, which would never practice at that time." He's like, "I want to show these videos to the players." And those are the sacrifices that I think have at your age that have made you like helped you become the player you are. So like for me as a coach, watching you develop, I really hope that you push to go overseas and to play on the national team and continue with Alberta because those are limited times you can only do that, and you have that work ethic and the will to do it, and you're becoming a great handball player, and the only thing you need to do is work, and those opportunities will come. So like as a coach, like I thank you. You're a enjoyable player to coach, and it's great watching you really grow as a handball player.
Thank you.
And
No, I really appreciate that.
yeah,
Thank you.
and when go on, sorry.
I guess all I can say is just thanks to you and Tyrell, and shout out Brent Cox, who coached me in grade 10,
Yeah,
as well as all my teammates for a lot of the reasons. Older
yeah,
players, Craig Fisher, Parker Love, Greg
yeah,
Chauvet, just looking up to them and hoping to emulate some of their success is just,
yeah.
yeah, really enjoyed my time, and credit to everyone else.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say is that we have some young, talented players. Like yesterday was, some did the outdoor practices in May, and you can see in 5 weeks their improvement on their individual skills. And yesterday watching them, there's some really good young players that I hope they're going to kick you guys in the butt and push you to work harder.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So thank you for this, and hopefully we get to see you soon.
Yeah, of
And
course.
so
No,
I just
thank you
want
very much.
just hold on here for a second, okay? I'm just gonna finish it, then I'll be right on.